welcome back to day 5 of our Yellowstone Trek. Today we're going to head to West Thumb Basin and Yellowstone Lake, but along the way, hopefully we'll see some fountain paint pots, so let's go. The Fountain Paint Pots Trail sits right along Grand Loop, just before Grand Prismatic, and it's part of the lower Geyser Basin. Named for the colorful mud pots, Fountain Paint Pots is home to many hydrothermal features. We parked, followed the rough half-mile boardwalk path, and checked some of these out. We could see the orange rust stain of the bacteria mat and oxidation from Silex Spring. This spring has an average temperature of 174 degrees Fahrenheit and is named for the large amount of silica found in and around this feature. The silica comes from the underlying volcanic rock, which the hot water dissolves, and then it's deposited on top, and then it lines the pool and forms the terraces along the runoff channels. No worries, the last time it erupted was 2006. Next was the fountain paint pots, which are named for the reds, yellows, and browns of the mud in this area. The different colors are derived from the different states of oxidation of iron in the mud. As with all hot springs, the heat in the caldera forces pressurized water up through the ground, and then it's expelled here. All the rising gases cause the bubbling action. The bubbling action in the mud varies with each season. In the early summer, the mud is real watery from the high water table and due to rain and snow melt, but by the end of the summer, the mud is a lot thicker, and you can see here that was the case. When we crested the hill, we saw a few fumaroles. A fumarole is a vent in the surface of the earth that just spews gases and vapors. It's pretty cool. Leather Pool gets its name from the leather-like color that stems from the lower, consistent 143 degree temperature. And next, we have Red Spouter, which is pretty cool because it exhibits the behavior of fumaroles, hot springs, and mud pots. In the spring and summer, its pools are filled with splashy, muddy water, and it sometimes has a red tone. And then, when the water table's low, like now, it becomes a hissing fumarole. Now we find two very popular geysers, Morning Geyser and Fountain Geyser. Fountain Geyser looks like a placid blue pool as the water slowly rises. This geyser gives little warning of its pending eruption, but when it does blow, it's one of the most beautiful geysers in the park. It erupts anywhere from 10 to 50 feet into the air for 20 minutes or more. And then Morning Geyser seldom erupts, but when it does, it's one of the park's largest. It bursts 150 to 200 feet into the air and anywhere from 60 to 100 feet wide. That's crazy. Next we see Spasm Geyser bubbling away and Clepsydra in the background. Spasm is usually bubbling and can be a precursor to fountains eruptions. Clepsydra Geyser's name is Greek for water clock, and it was given that because the geyser used to erupt every 3 minutes. But there was an earthquake in 1959, and ever since then, Clepsydra erupts almost all the time without pause. But sometimes it stops when fountain erupts. Now we see Jet Geyser erupting. It erupts every few minutes, and sometimes it can spew up to 20 feet into the air. It's pretty regular. As we stood there watching Jet Geyser erupt, we saw some people scurry about, and we saw a large amount of water being thrown into the air from the top of the hill. We realized it was Clepsydra going off, so we stood there and watched it for a while. It was pretty cool. After watching Clepsydra for a while, we made our way down the boardwalk, checking out the center deposits on either side and making our way back to the parking lot. It is worth noting that on the other side of the Grand Loop Drive, there's Firehole Lake Drive, which is a nice little pass that you can drive through and see some more features, but it was closed today, so we didn't get to go. Next, we went on to Kepler Cascades. Kepler Cascades is a waterfall that sits right on the Firehole River and is approximately 2.5 miles south on Grand Loop Drive from Old Faithful. The Cascades drop approximately 150 feet over multiple drops, with the longest drop being at the bottom at 50 feet tall. And as we were about to leave, we noticed steam in the distance. It was Old Faithful. This was the 5th time we got to see it in 2 days. Next up was West Thumb Geyser Basin, which is a unique area that sits right along Lake Yellowstone. The boardwalk area here is roughly 0.6 of a mile in total length. West Thumb has less geyser activity than the other basins in Yellowstone Park, but for its size, it has it all. It has hot springs, pools, mud pots, fumaroles, and lakeshore geysers. And like I said before, it sits right along a beautiful lake. There were many thermal features here that were unlabeled, but it was pretty cool to see them all over the place. Just random holes here and there, bubbling water, and then right next to the lake. The West Thumb Basin was created some 160,000 years ago, when a magma chamber bulged up under the surface of the earth and cracked it. Then in turn, the magma, as lava, weighed on the surface and caused a collapse. Water later filled the collapsed area of the caldera, forming an extension of Yellowstone Lake. This created the source of heat and water that feed the West Thumb Geyser Basin today. Anyone up for some steam-cooked fish? Fishing cone is a unique thermal feature that received its name from the early explorers who stood on the cone, cast their lines, and when they caught a fish, leaving it on the hook, they cooked them in the vent of fishing cone. Fishing is no longer allowed on fishing cone or any other thermal feature along the lake. The shoreline has changed so many times, and fishing cones usually filled with high water, especially during the early summer. We made our way up the boardwalk from the lake to find Black Pool, which isn't black. It's now a beautiful pool, but in the past it had a lower temperature that allowed thick mats of dark green and brown thermophiles to grow, making it appear black. The water temperatures went up by over 50 degrees in the early 90s, which killed all these thermophiles. The next major feature of this area we saw is the Abyss Pool, which is one of the deepest pools in the park at a depth of over 53 feet. The pool erupted back in the 1990s to a height of over 100 feet, but since then it's been pretty quiet. As we made our way up the boardwalk, we decided to go across the middle boardwalk where there are a ton of thermal features that exist, like Twin Geyser, which is one geyser with two vents. There's Blue Funnel, which is an optical illusion. There's Ephedra, perforated, and between those three, they all lost water heights and sunk below their rims the last time Abyss erupted. There was also Percolating, which was doing just that, it was percolating. There's Collapsing and Ledge, which are both very hot but underfilled pools. Surging Spring received its name from occasional surges of water which overflow from the spring. This cyclic activity occurs nearly every 4 to 5 minutes, especially when the water table is higher. And there's a ton of various other springs and ponds and pools and holes, so just keep your eyes open, but I highly recommend taking this path. After seeing a lot at the West Thumb Basin, we trekked on down the road and around Yellowstone Lake. The lake is the largest body of water in the national park. At 7,732 feet above sea level, it covers 136 square miles and has 110 miles of shoreline. While the average depth of the lake is 139 feet, its greatest depth is roughly 394. Yellowstone Lake is the largest freshwater lake above 7,000 feet in North America. Along the lake we traveled, past Lake Yellowstone Lodge and over Fishing Bridge, heading out the East Exit Road. A few miles out there, once again, were more hydrothermal features. This area is known as Steamboat Point. The hillside beneath us looked like it was burning. It was a sight. We continued out towards the east exit for another couple miles and then made a left turn onto Lake Butte Scenic Drive. This exit takes you on a 1-mile paved road upward to a scenic overlook of Yellowstone Lake. Here you can usually have a good view of the lake's islands, the surrounding forest, the burned areas, and even the majestic Grand Teton of the Teton mountain range to the south. But that wasn't the case for us. Today it was rainy, cloudy, and foggy, but hey, we tried. Hey, just for your information, there's also a restroom on top. We were a little wet and cold, so we headed back down to the Lake Hotel, or Lake Yellowstone Hotel. Built in 1891, it's the oldest operating hotel in the park. It was redesigned and substantially expanded by Robert Reamer, the same architect of the Old Faithful Inn. In contrast to the Old Faithful Inn, the Lake Hotel is a relatively plain, clapboarded colonial revival-like structure, yellow in color. There is the main hotel with many different suite options and rooms, and then there are more primitive cabins available. The hotel is only open from certain dates in May to October every year, so double check before you book. It was designated as a National Historic Landmark in 2015. Next, we visited Mud Volcano, which sits halfway between the Lake Hotel and the Yellowstone waterfalls right off of Grand Loop. The area is very acidic. Iron sulfide is responsible for the dark gray and black or brown colored water, while hydrogen sulfide produces this rotten egg smell, which is very noticeable. Phew! And once again, we began our hike around the area, making sure we stayed on the boardwalk. One of the coolest thermal features here is Dragon's Mouth. This is a turbulent hot spring with a cavernous mouth. The water sloshes rhythmically in and out of the cavern like waves, giving the impression of a large overflow. However, the actual discharge is quite small. Much of the activity and energy is located within the cavern. As hot water rises to the surface, hydrogen sulfide, carbon dioxide, and water vapor gases expand, creating a pressure explosion inside the cave. The result activity is a scary sloshing, belching, and steaming. Is there something living in there? A dragon? Mud Volcano is just that, a mud-filled volcano. Its average temperature is 184 degrees and it's roughly 17 feet deep. Many years back, the mud volcano was very active with bellowing and exploding mud. Many earthquakes have made this feature change from that to being a little bit more still. There are times of severe eruption where the mud bathes the boardwalk. Luckily today it wasn't a threat, and it's just a quiet cauldron with occasional churning caused by the rising gases. We couldn't make the trek any further up the path due to weather conditions, so we made our way back down to the parking area and traveled a little further up the road to see Sulphur Cauldron. Sulphur Cauldron's turbulent waters have a pH of approximately 1 to 2, which is about as acidic as car battery acid or stomach fluids. Its name comes directly from the large amounts of free sulfur in its waters, which run down the hillside and directly into the Yellowstone River. In between the raindrops, we jumped back in the Jeep and made our way further north to the Yellowstone River overlook in Hayden Valley. Hayden Valley spans approximately 50 square miles, making it a significant and accessible region for visitors traveling within the park. Originally, this area was submerged and was an arm of Yellowstone Lake. As the lake waters receded, it left behind a vast plain which is now home to many wildlife. We had some sandwiches packed, so we sat in the car and enjoyed the view over lunch. And after finishing our late lunch, we continued north up Grand Loop Road and made a left on the North Canyon Drive back toward the west entrance. We spotted a coyote along the way, so we got a few pics. If you see a bunch of cars stopped along the road, it's usually because of wildlife, so get your cameras ready. And last on our list today was an impromptu trip down Firehole Canyon Drive. This drive is a 2-mile one-way road off of Grand Loop just south of Madison. Our main feature was Firehole Falls, which is a 40-foot drop surrounded by rhyolite rock. There's a small parking area right at the falls, and the road's very tight in spots, so be careful. There are many other cascades along the way, and towards the end there's a swimming hole, which is one of only 2 swimming holes in the entire national park. And don't let the name fool you, it's not that hot, actually pretty cold, so no swimming for us today. We made our way back to the west entrance and out to West Yellowstone, where we did some shopping and then headed down south to Island Park. I want to thank you for following our adventures and keep coming back. Be sure to like and subscribe.